Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a slightly different angle and corner of my setup over here. I'm sitting on my couch because in front of me is a book that takes up about the whole size of my coffee table. It's a pretty awesome artist edition. It's the Batman Year One Artist Edition by David Mazzucchelli. If you don't know what an artist edition is, it's pretty much a really big version of a printed comic. So when an artist draws a comic, here is the printed Batman Year One comic. This is what you'll find in the comic stores. It's drawn, or it's printed at this size, which is the size of your standard American comic, at least. When an artist like David Mazzucchelli and others draw a comic like this, they draw it much bigger because they want to get a certain level of detail that they might not be able to achieve if they drew it at this very size. So they draw it bigger, usually at 11 by 17. And traditionally speaking, it's drawn with pencil and ink. And then, of course, it's run through production and letters go on it and colors go on it. And then it gets shrunk down and printed at this size. But an artist edition collects the original art that was drawn at that original size. But a good artist edition, like this one, includes all of the imperfections, the quote-unquote mistakes, the notes and the margins, all that amazing stuff. That's the stuff as an artist that I really want to see. And books like this often collect a lot of the preliminary work before even the inking happens, which is the pencils and the thumbnails and the layouts, the sketches for the covers, the cover art itself. So if you got your copy, you totally know what I'm talking about. If you didn't get your copy, hopefully this video gives you a little bit of an insight as to what is in this book and some of the beauty that you can expect not only from this book, but artist editions in general. Whoa. Shoot, look at that. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Look at that. That's huge. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be my first time opening up this awesome, amazing artist edition. Already, just by the look of the cover, it's super impressive. Like you can see the coffee stain or ink stain or whatever that might be, all the wear, all the whiteout. It literally looks like I'm looking at a piece of original art right here. Really wonderful, awesome cover. It really kind of gives an insight as to what might be inside of this book. So I'm not going to go page by page through the whole book, but just want to give you a feel of it and look at some of the really cool stuff nice and up close. So if you don't have this, hopefully this gives you a sense of what's in this book and what you might be able to expect. Words, stuff to read. Definitely not going to be reading that right now, but I would assume it's some sort of introduction, maybe written by David Mazzucchelli. Oh, this is awesome. Some character designs, preliminary stuff. That's pretty cool. I feel like I've seen this one online before. Some of his designs for Bruce Wayne and Batman. Yeah, he's got that real just like chunky line style. That's so, it just feels so natural. And I really respond to ink work that doesn't feel like it's very like labored over. It feels very naturalistic and organic. And if he had to draw that again, it would look different. You know what I mean? Like there's not like a exact formulaic approach to his drawing, which I really appreciate it. It has a very organic feel to it, and I think it's perfect for the mood, especially of a Gotham City and a Batman story. By the way, this book has that really nice new book smell. That's pretty awesome. I would assume that this is the full size right here. This looks like 11 by 17 to me, and then it's sort of just matted on the overall page design. Oh wow! So this is like the pencil preliminary of the first page or the title page here. And if I could zoom out, I would assume that this may be the exact size of it that he worked on, which looks like it's about a quarter of an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. Oh, this is awesome. I guess these are all of his like partial inks and pencils. The interesting thing to see here in his process, I wondered this when I was looking at his Daredevil artist edition as well, is like how tight his pencils were before he started inking. And this is an indication right here that, you know, his pencils are almost like layout thumbnail level until he starts putting ink down. That's pretty incredible. I mean, that's a real hack in terms of saving time and also keeping like that energy on the page. But you have to be really, really confident in your inking skills and just your overall drawing skills to not have an underdrawing that is really all that rendered. So much of this is really just coming to life in the inks. And I think that contributes so much to the energy and I think the emotion of a book like this. Just doesn't feel labored over in a bad way. It's rare that you get to see David Mazzucchelli pencils, and this is a really great opportunity to see this stuff. I would assume that this is actual size as well. So this looks like half of a 11 by 17, perhaps. Maybe he was doing 4 on a page. I could be wrong. I don't have my ruler with me, but I'll have to measure that later. Awesome. You could see all the storytelling is happening right there. It seems like he uses style much more as a storytelling device than anything else. So depending on the type of story that he's telling, that's the style that he uses for that particular comic. And it's just yet another reminder of how much drawing is really a function of storytelling as far as comic book drawing is concerned. You certainly want to make it look good and interesting and cool and inviting to a reader. But I think if you completely lose touch with the idea that the marks you're making are just as much of a storytelling mechanism as any other aspect of storytelling, I think if you lose sight of that, you're almost missing out on the full potential, really, of what a comic artist can contribute to a comic project. Not only is this the stage where all the storytelling is really happening, but this is where he's indicating to himself, and I'm sure to the letterer as well, where the letters are going to be, the narration boxes and the word balloons and all that, because that's a very important thing to take into account, especially during this stage, so that you give all that stuff the proper amount of real estate that it needs. So many times when we're getting really excited to draw a comic, sometimes we forget that this thing might have words and that you don't want to squeeze those things in at the last minute. So to be able to account for that in as early a stage as possible is really important. And it seems effortless that he's able to have, you know, a fair amount of narration boxes and word balloons while still having the compositions feel like so open and not cramped. I think that's one of the hardest things to do, and he seems to do that really, really well here. But ultimately, it's just a compositional thing. These narration boxes and word balloons, they're just as integral a part of the composition as the figure work and the backgrounds are. Page 1, nice establishing shot of a very gritty Gotham City subway. If you're from any kind of city like New York or Chicago, you're probably familiar with this kind of a scene. But the level of detail and specificity in terms of like location and establishing shot is so great without going into such like very precise detail. It almost feels like it's an on location drawing, like he was in a subway with his sketchbook just drawing from what he saw in real life. And I feel like that's what gives it that very kind of real quality, maybe the more relatable, mature quality that this story kind of has. And then I'm not sure if he would have done the sound effects in a panel like this. I feel like it seems very a part of the artwork. I feel like I'm leaning towards that's him doing the sound effects, and then someone else doing the letters on top of it. That's like real comic book making right there. Okay, so just for size context, this is a copy of the printed collection of Batman Year One. So you can see the difference in terms of actual size of the original art versus the size of the printed version. So that's quite a difference. So this is how he was drawing it right here, and this is how it gets printed. And that's so much of the beauty of artist edition, is that you get to see all the details that might have gotten sort of missed when it gets shrunk down, printed, colored. You can really see like the hand behind the drawings so much more, as it compares to the printed final production, which is still beautiful. The colors in this book are really great. But I love to really just compare and contrast and see, how much the colors contributed, what might have gotten lost in production. So it's really, really nice to always appreciate that stuff. And this is just a little look at some of the contrast between original versus printed. Again, from like a storytelling perspective as well, it's really great to see the strategic use of backgrounds. You need backgrounds, obviously, for context of where the story is happening, where the characters are located, but you don't need to show every bit of every background in every panel. You can see here in this middle tier, there are no backgrounds except for a little bit of this trash that she's falling into, but it's very, very open. And if the rest of that page were that open, it might be confusing as to where these characters are. But in this first panel here, you get a sense of he's sort of referring back to just a couple of pages beforehand. They're in a very urban area. There's buildings, and then it's established here that Selina is on a story above them. She's like second or third floor. So then when you get to a page like this, you really only need to show a little bit of that background. You don't need to overcrowd things because it's already been established. And then you can kind of let the rest of the story just happen without overcrowding it. And suddenly you just have like pure context without being overwhelmed by backgrounds. So not only does that make it easier and more pleasant for the reader to read, because there's not like this overwhelming sense of visual information happening, but it's also a really efficient way for an artist to work and stay on deadline, because you're not like laboring over these really intricate backgrounds. You could kind of devote your time to these very specific shots where you want to show more background and give a sense of place. And then you can sort of let the action and storytelling happen in these other panels where you could also then save time because there's little to no backgrounds at all. But being reminded of the type of amazing work that can be made with just a brush and some ink and some paper is always a really nice reminder for me. And it's always super inspiring to know that as long as you have the fundamentals and as long as you have the imagination, all you really need is a few pieces of art supplies, really, and you could kind of create this whole world. Here's another great example of where efficiency and storytelling kind of come together and are mutually beneficial, I guess you can say. The use of silhouettes, I think, is a really great storytelling mechanism. Silhouettes allow the reader to kind of connect with the scene and the characters on a much more emotional level, because there's not all this very specific detail drawn on it. Therefore, the lack of specificity kind of engages your imagination a little bit more. I feel like the reader can place themselves or an emotion that they might have had into a scene like this, feeling whatever might be happening a little bit stronger because of the fact that it's so open and not super specific. You'd imagine that in a scene like this, although it's completely blacked out, that he's probably not smiling or laughing, right? You could kind of get a sense of what this character is feeling and what his face might look like, but it doesn't need to be drawn. And I think it's even more effective, again, on like a emotional basis by blacking it out. And then again, from a efficiency standpoint, obviously it takes a lot less time to draw stuff like this. I mean, you need to be super accurate in terms of your proportions and figure drawing and all of that. This is by far not easy, but the lack of detail will also, from an artist perspective and an efficiency perspective, take a lot less time. So it's kind of where the two meet like peanut butter and jelly and create a really good situation that's good for both the artist and the reader. Here's a great example of David Mazzucchelli's like reductionist, very simplified way of drawing at times that almost, in a panel like this, almost borders on like a newspaper strip. It really speaks to his ability to break things down to their just necessary lines and shapes, much like an Alex Toth would do, not really worried about all this extra frivolous detail that doesn't necessarily contribute to the storytelling, which it seems is very primary for David Mazzucchelli. I mean, look at a panel like that. That's super simplistic and again almost cartoony in a newspaper comic strip kind of way. But it's super effective because you're not really supposed to be spending too much time on this panel. Kind of speeds up the time here. And then you could see just like the pure kind of like organic, energetic quality to the lines here in the sound effects. It really feels like something that's almost out of like a alternative underground comic. But then, of course, on the very next page, we're back to moody Batman comic. So he doesn't stay there too long, but he uses it when necessary. And I think it speaks to his knowledge of different types of comic book language and comic book storytelling, not relying on just sort of one set of comic book tropes, but perhaps incorporating tropes from different eras and different types of styles, different artists. And it's really so cool just to see like the naturalistic kind of gestural ink lines here for that smoke. I love looking at this stuff. I mean, there's some really great precise inking that I really admire as well, but there's something to be said for stuff like this that just has like a lot of feeling attached to it. It feels like he did this with like a really rough brush and maybe even just some of his finger smudging that smoke. When you look at it up close, it looks very, rough and sort of dashed off in many ways. But then when you zoom out, it's such a nice part of that composition. And then, of course, when it gets shrunk down so much, you don't even really realize just how organically drawn some of these elements are. Here's some more pencils. It seems like in between each issue, they open it up with just the pencils of the whole issue, and then you go into the full-size inks. So that's really helpful, just as an artist, to kind of compare and contrast the various stages of the whole production. This is like the textbook for the comic artist, if you will. Just all the information is here. If you're willing to study it and spend time looking at it and understanding it, I think you'll have a deeper understanding of your own process moving forward. It's also really helpful to see that at a stage like this, it really just comes down to just blocky shapes, because ultimately it's all about compositions and getting those compositions right. And it's not about drawing the pupils of the eye just yet, not at this stage. It's more about all of these just blocky cylinders and squares and just really the fundamentals of drawing. Case in point right here, this is all just really, really basic figure drawing, blocking in the figure, but all the information and composition and storytelling are there, along with where all the words are going to go as well. So, really not much detail at all, yet the whole thing is right there. So much of comic art too is all about like, simplified ways of drawing certain atmospheres and emotions and expressions. It's kind of like iconographic in many ways, and this is like it's supposed to be sort of like a damp, rainy summer night, I would assume. And just by making these kind of reflective lines here in the ground, it makes the ground look wet. It's all about just the little bits of expression that's happening in those lines. It's where they're put, it's how they're put down, just the way he drew the light radiating from the street light there. Again, it looks cartoony. It looks like underground comics in a way, but it just works. This panel is wonderful too, with the backgrounds the way they are. Like that really reads as like a city street background, but it's a wet kind of damp night. It feels like it's behind them in the background. It feels like it's out of focus, but you didn't have to put like a fancy digital layer over that to blur everything out. You're just suggesting it. I feel like his understanding and knowledge of art outside of comics kind of helps when he's drawing these different indications of backgrounds and shorthands. Lines like this to me feel much more like expressionistic than it does, comic art per se. Speaking of being influenced by art outside of comics, of course, this is an homage to, I guess it's called Nighthawks. Is that the painting, the Edward Hopper painting? And then he called the diner Hopper, which is pretty cool. Perhaps this is one of the most like referenced paintings ever. Probably is. Maybe this and like the Mona Lisa or something. But I think it's really clever. And again, it's kind of a nod to his appreciation of art outside of comic art. And then, of course, with artist editions, one of my favorite things to see is just little things like this, where you can see where he like whited out some lines. You wonder why he did. Maybe he felt like there was too much black there. Maybe there was some sort of a smudge. Who knows? But I love seeing that sort of like human element in comic art. And of course, you'll never see that in the printed version because everything's all cleaned up. But it's these artist editions where you really get to see the human hand. Like this right here is just a paste up. He drew that on a separate paper and then pasted it straight onto the board. So yeah, I just love stuff like that. That's what makes these things worth it for me. Here's really something that's super cool and that you can only get in an artist edition, which is, so it seems here that he just photostated the same establishing shot of, I guess that's Wayne Manor from issue number 1. And he wanted to reuse it. So he just used the photocopy of the same drawing that he did and pasted it to that panel and then wrote it in the notes over here, I guess, for the production, just to show that it's pretty much the same image and it's going to be -3 tree branches in the foreground. And I think that's a reference to the fact that early on they were showing him training and he was, kicking trees down. So there would be three less trees that he kicked down, which I think is a nice little attention to detail and consistency. But as far as efficiency goes, that's one less panel that you have to draw. There was going to be an establishing shot there anyway. You already drew it. Why not just reuse it? I didn't yet get to read the full introduction, but one of the pieces of the introduction by David Mazzucchelli that's highlighted makes reference to the fact that he was only 25 years old when he was drawing this comic, which is pretty incredible. It's also a little bit depressing, but it's really inspiring because even though I'm older than 25, I still aspire to get better and better each day as an artist and a storyteller. And to see someone at that young age produce this body of work is super inspiring. So I think the importance of artist editions really can't be understated as far as I'm concerned. It really is such a great way, like I said, of developing yourself as a comic artist, an illustrator, just an artist in general. But like I said, they are expensive. And I've mentioned this in a previous video. There are these things called ARTISAN editions, and they're artist editions that usually come out like a year later, and it's still put out by IDW. It's the same contents of a full-on artist edition, but in a smaller paperback form. So this is actually, I have the Daredevil Artisan edition. I made a video about this book too. It was another flip through. You might want to check that out. But this one was $50, and I think I got it on sale for like $35. So it's dramatically more affordable than a full-on artist edition. So of course you lose the whole sense of scale and scope of the original art, but you get everything else. You see all the notes in the margins, you see the whiteout, you see the hand of the artist, all that stuff. And for me, that's all the really important stuff anyway. I think the size and the scope of it really is like the cherry on top. And personally for me, as far as Batman Year One is concerned, it's my favorite Batman comic. I'm a big David Mazzucchelli fan. I feel like that's the kind of book that I want to have at that full size. I don't know if IDW is going to eventually put out an artisan edition of this book, but if a book like this is out of your price range right now, which I totally understand, it's an expensive book, you might want to check out some of the other artisan editions that are available, but I'll have some links in my description of some of the ones that I have and some of the other ones that look cool and are available that are kind of like on my list. This is not sponsored or anything like that. The links down below are affiliate links. So if you decide to use those specific Amazon links to buy the book, I'll get like a little kickback from it. You don't have to use that link. It's totally up to you. So I hope you enjoy that look at this awesome artist edition book. Like I said, I didn't want to go through like page by page and give the whole thing away, but I hope that I gave you at least a really good insight as to what is in there and gave you some close-up shots so you can get a real sense of what that original art looks like. I feel super inspired. I hope you do as well. If you're into some of the storytelling aspects that I talked about in this video, as far as David Mazzucchelli is concerned, there's a really great video of a talk that he did, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago. It's only like 20, 25 minutes, but it seems like it's like a really abbreviated version of his entire thesis as far as storytelling and comic art is concerned. And he articulates his understanding of comic storytelling in a really clear way. And like I said, it's only 20, 25 minutes, but you could get a lot out of it. I know I have. I've watched it several times. So I'll link that in the description below if that's something you want to check out as well. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of some of the stuff you saw in this book. Are you a David Mazzucchelli fan? Are you a Batman Year One fan? Do you have a favorite Batman comic in general? I know a lot of people say Dark Knight Returns, but for me, I'm a Batman Year One guy. But let me know what your favorite Batman comic is. Also, do you have artist editions? What's your favorite one, if so? I have some others. I have a Chris Samnee Daredevil artist edition that was given to me as a Christmas gift, one of my favorites. I have a John Romita Amazing Spider-Man artist edition, which I actually made a video of. I'll also try to link that in the description as well. But if you would like me in the future to make more of these kinds of videos going through either artist editions or my Chris Samnee Daredevil artist edition, let me know if that's something of interest to you. I'm always super psyched to look at that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely let me know if you'd like to see some more videos around artist editions in general. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to like the video. And if you want to see more videos like this, definitely subscribe as well. I have plenty of other comic art related videos that you might be interested in seeing. and also many more to come. So as always, thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.